Chapter 91 Key Clues, 0.618 Golden Ratio. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Su Ming Speculation. Remember the domain name of this site, Taiwan Novel Network. It made Su Changsheng and Lin Tian a little confused, and even more surprised, because they didn't know, where on earth could Su Ming conclude that the murderer of the dismemberment case at Magic City University used the hammer grip method, which was easy to exert force. It also completely ruled out the two common doctor's knife-holding methods, holding a bow and holding a pen. Of course, the most important thing is, the hammer grip method is usually used for knocking and chopping, such large-scale and undetailed things, but now, from this recorded video, the murderer of this dismemberment case should be quite meticulous and have outstanding knife skills. Otherwise, how could it be possible that when dismembering the victim, even the size and shape of the body parts could be almost the same? But the hammer grip method basically cannot practice knife skills. After all, has anyone ever seen someone practice fine knife skills with the rough hand gesture of holding a hammer? It seems that he can see the confusion of Lin Tian and Su Changsheng. Su Ming did not hesitate at all, and immediately picked up the remote control on the table and chose to replay the video of the murderer dismembering the body. The slightly scary bloody hand scene appeared again, when the murderer showed his bloody palm and was ready to show the victim's head from all angles. Su Ming immediately pressed the pause button and greatly enlarged the blood on the murderer's palm. Then, Su Ming strode directly to the screen, pointed at the blood on the top of the murderer's left palm with different depths, and squinted his eyes and inferred. Director Lin, Brother Sheng. First of all, we have previously determined through the body parts and the location of the skull fracture that the murderer is a left-handed person. So when picking up heavy objects or wielding tools in daily life, the murderer must have habitually used his left hand. In addition, from the protruding finger joints of the murderer and the many healed and recently inflicted cuts on the side, it shows that he has been working or training for a long time. Now, look carefully at the bloodstains on the top of the murderer's left palm. Can you see the extremely hidden and varying degrees of fracture? This is obviously different from the uniform bloodstains in the center. Hearing this, Su Changsheng frowned immediately, thought very seriously for a few seconds, and shook his head with a little confusion. Xiao Ming, what can this blood stain of varying depths indicate? No matter from which angle you look at it, this is a very accidental thing, and I feel that it cannot be used as a clue or source of evidence. It's like the murderer pressed his hand in a pool of blood, which would cause the depth of the blood stain on his palm to vary. Before Su Changsheng finished speaking, Lin Tian directly knocked on the table, interrupting his subsequent words, and explained uncertainly. No, Asheng. Look at the blood on the murderer's palm, which means he should have pressed his whole hand into the pool of blood. But there are bloodstains of varying depths on the palm, and Xiao Ming just specifically proposed the hammer grip method, which is more convenient for exerting force. Think about it. Does the hammer grip method require the entire palm to be tightly attached to the wooden handle of the tool, especially the top of the palm, which is needed to fix it to prevent it from slipping out of the hand? That's why, when doing high-intensity training and wielding tools, the top of the palm will definitely be repeatedly worn and healed, and finally form prominent calluses. For doctors or forensic doctors, there is no need to use the hammer grip to facilitate force, let alone calluses on the palms. However, from the murderer's carefulness in cutting the body and his familiar techniques, this murderer is probably, in daily work or practice, not only is it necessary to use the hammer grip to facilitate force, but also to cut and decompose very finely. If it meets these 2 points, the relevant professions I can think of at present are butchers, chefs, duck slicers, tuna cutters, etc., but something is not right. Speaking of this, Lin Tian suddenly overturned his previous guess, frowned and sniffed the tobacco smell on his index finger, and said slowly. According to the content of the post on the dark web, the details we deduced yesterday show that the murderer should have a high social status, and his fame and money should also be among the best. And judging from the state in the recorded video, the murderer's hands should have been specially maintained in various ways, but for professions like chefs and butchers, there is no need to maintain their hands at all. The most important thing is, There is no particularly obvious status gap between these professions and college students, and it cannot be as described in that post. It is difficult for us, the police and the public, to associate it with this case. At the same time, Su Chongsheng also figured out the depth of the blood on the murderer's palm, and then followed Lin Tian's words. Master, it's more than that. If it is a common profession like chefs and butchers, there should be no need to hide their left-handed characteristics. After all, there are quite a few people working in these professions. A left-handed person alone cannot lock anything, let alone hide. And I remember there was a sentence like this in that post. To avoid suspicion to the greatest extent, the best way is to let the prey find it by itself and cover up all the whereabouts by yourself. I think it is difficult for a profession like butcher to attract a college student, not to mention that you have to cover up your actions by yourself. So the murderer's profession should be very special and have a certain appeal to college students. At this moment, the whole conference room fell silent. Su Ming and the other two began to think seriously about what kind of profession can meet so many requirements: eat with your hands, fingers often have cuts, need to hold the tool tightly for a long time, hammer or cut hard, resulting in calluses on the top of the palm, also good at fine segmentation work, able to cut the body pieces into almost the same size and shape. The overall number of practitioners is small, the economic conditions are excellent, and there is a certain appeal or value to college students. The social status gap between this and college students is huge, and it is difficult to associate this profession with others under normal circumstances. Judging from the cutting of the victim's body parts, he should also have a good understanding of human joint tissues. The three people kept thinking. The recorded video on the screen was still playing. Su Ming leaned comfortably on the chair, tapping the back of his left hand with his right index finger, squinting his eyes and emptying himself. His mind was constantly screening what profession could meet so many requirements, and at this moment, the only words of the murderer in the dismemberment recording video slowly entered Su Ming's empty mind. It is even more anxious and nostalgic than the golden cutting rate of 0.618. This is truly perfect, a truly perfect work. Chapter 92. Su Ming confirmed the murderer's occupation: sculptor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The golden ratio of 0.618, as well as, truly a perfect piece, two rather special words suddenly sounded in Su Ming's mind again. This is the second time I heard this sentence. First, it was in the high-end suite that Chu Pengfei had booked, but due to the special circumstances at the time, and because he had not yet obtained so many clues, there is no extension at all through these two words. But now, Su Ming suddenly remembered, in that post at that time, there was such a special sentence. If you regard the prey as a work, then you have to guide them, and even deliberately leave some misleading clues and evidence, so that the police will never, work. Talk about murder as a work of art, plus, that kind of obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is severe to the extreme, requires cutting the size and shape of the corpse into almost the same size. Now, Su Ming seemed to have grasped the most critical point. He suddenly opened his sharp eyes, looked at Lin Tian and Su Chongsheng, who were still thinking, and said extremely seriously. Lin Bureau, Brother Sheng. I already know roughly what occupation the murderer is most likely to have. This sentence, Lin Tian and Su Chongsheng stopped their thoughts in an instant and quickly turned to look at Su Ming, their eyes full of curiosity and urgency. There is no pretense to be profound. Su Ming directly picked up the remote control and replayed the only sentence the murderer said in the video recorded in front of him. Compared to 0.618 gold. Immediately afterwards, Su Ming opened the picture of the post taken from the forum. The penultimate sentence in the post, where he pointed at the murderer of the Morton University dismemberment case and shared his own experience, is the sentence that treats murder as a work. He looked around at Lin Tian and Su Chongsheng, squinted his eyes slightly and said seriously. I just suddenly discovered. The absconding murderer of the 5.13 corpse dismemberment case, I don't know if it was a subconscious habit of speaking, or he deliberately described the murder as a work. I even called the corpse dismemberment case 20 years ago a perfect work. Certainly. Treating murder as a work may not be able to prove anything. After all, there are not many criminals with such a morbid mentality. But The golden ratio of 0.618 in this sentence, I think, undoubtedly significantly reduces the murderer's industry. Because at that time, the murderer looked at the body of the victim that he had cut into pieces and said these words. In his eyes, the body parts of the victim that he carefully cut out were more outstanding and perfect than the golden ratio. That certainly shows. There is a high probability that the murderer will often come into contact with the term golden ratio, or it may correspond to some special things, and he has subconsciously used it as a comparison. But there is also a possibility that these things are completely false clues deliberately brought out by the murderer just to confuse the situation. But just like what I said before, if the murderer planned to avoid being caught by us 20 years later, then there is really no need to continue to worry about it. It would be a better choice to choose other members of the drug trafficking organization to break through. But I think this probability is impossible, and I don't dare to think that there are criminals who can plan 20 years later. So the question now is, what industry can use or be exposed to the golden ratio and often have its own works? I think the murderer's industry type can be roughly identified. The words just fell. Su Chongqing slammed the table excitedly and spoke quickly with great excitement. The art industry. Those whose main occupations are painting and photography are more often exposed to the golden ratio. Lin Tian, who was sitting next to him, still remained quite calm and did not get excited about further locking in the truth. He added. Compared to painting. I think those jade carvers and graphic designers should have easier access to this special and beautiful number. But the previous conditions must be met. Su Ming nodded in agreement with Su Chongqing and Lin Tian's further speculations, but in his heart, at present, there is already a profession that is close to and satisfactorily meets all the previous restrictions, from the niche, status, fame, techniques, and even the familiarity of the human skeleton. It can be said to be 100% satisfying, just like a career carved out of a template. Take a deep breath. There was a glint in Su Ming's eyes, and he spoke quite seriously and confidently. Lin Bureau, Brother Sheng. I am now roughly 90% sure that the murderer of the 5.13 dismemberment case is most likely someone who was quite famous as early as 20 years ago. Sculptor. At the same time, the top floor of Xingxing building in Luzhou City, K, still wearing a bathrobe, was leaning on the recliner quite comfortably, while eating foie gras flown from France. He looked at the laptop screen not far away. Now, the screen of his laptop has been evenly cut into 12 parts, each of which contains real-time surveillance video. The place he is observing is the exit of the garage of the Criminal Investigation Brigade in the city where his organization members are located, and the entrance and exit of the Luzhou City Criminal Investigation Brigade not far away. It is obvious, he wants to control the movements of the criminal investigation brigades in various cities in order to carry out various responses. As for why this special surveillance can be seen, the reason is very simple. For a powerful hacker, it is not difficult to hack the road surveillance near the criminal investigation brigades of various provinces and cities. At this time, the pastor, carrying a heavy grenade launcher and still holding a cigar in his mouth, he walked out of the room inside, picked up a piece of camouflage cloth expressionlessly, and wiped the grenade launcher carefully. Kay took a sip of high-quality foie gras like eating ice cream, looked at the Suzhou City Criminal Investigation Brigade where police cars kept coming in and out in the surveillance, and said slowly. Priest. Although Diao has solved the problem of Fat Cat, he will most likely be targeted by those mad dogs as the second target after the sculptor. Compared to the sculptor, I think Diao may not have the determination to turn himself into the final work before being caught by those mad dogs. The priest stopped wiping the grenade launcher for 2 seconds, and then wiped it carefully again, saying in a muffled voice. Don't worry, Kay. If Diao doesn't have the determination by then, I will give him the determination. Hearing this, Kay showed a nonchalant smile, leaned back on the recliner easily, and said meaningfully. No hurry, priest. When the time comes, I will use Diao to play a long-awaited big game with that mad dog named Su Ming. Chapter 93. This is a perfect portrait of the murderer. 20 years of persistence finally paid off. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the meeting room of the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Team. Diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit, diamond suit. After Su Ming mentioned the special profession of sculptor, Lin Tian and Su Changxing were stunned for a moment, then, both of them had a gleam in their eyes, because, the profession of sculptor is indeed rare enough, and the number of practitioners is pitifully small. It is indeed necessary to cover up the characteristic of being left-handed. The most important thing is, at present, from various angles, sculptors can fully meet the characteristics of the murderer of the 5.13 magic City University dismemberment case, because hammers and carving knives are often needed to shape and carve a whole piece of plaster, so, there are calluses left on the palms over the years, and there are various scars on the sides of the fingers, or newly healed wounds, which naturally appear to be extremely normal. After all, the profession of sculptor requires very delicate work, so it is easy to hurt yourself. At the same time, an excellent sculptor must definitely learn the structure of the human body, and even personally dissect and feel the structure of the human limbs. Only in this way can we carve out sufficiently excellent human body plaster works. In the case of the dismembered body of Magic City University, the deceased was finally divided into hundreds of pieces, and the murderer must have a very good understanding of the human body structure to be able to do this. Sculptors happen to be able to accurately meet this requirement. Then, in terms of social status, a young and famous sculptor is indeed very different from those newly enrolled college students. Under normal circumstances, it is impossible to think that this case has anything to do with niche professional sculptors. The most important thing is, no matter what type of sculptor, he must have been pursuing the perfection of his works throughout his life, and many people have suffered from extremely serious obsessive-compulsive disorder because of this. The so-called golden ratio is often used in various sculptures. All uncertainties or doubts have extremely reasonable explanations after entering the profession of sculptor. In criminal investigation, if a criminal suspect can match 80% of all the clues found, he can actually be roughly identified as the murderer, because, without real-time video footage or witnesses at the scene, the police's simulation and inference would inevitably be slightly different from the actual situation. 80% of the results are consistent. It is already quite accurate and worth using the memory recovery technique, but now, after substituting the profession of sculptor, it is found that the details are not only 80% consistent, but basically 100% consistent. This is enough to prove the profession of the murderer in the 5.13 Demon City University dismemberment case must be a sculptor. After sorting out his thoughts, Su Changxing suddenly slapped his head and said excitedly, "What the hell?" After being reminded by Su Ming, all the doubts and puzzles in my mind were instantly figured out. The profession of this murderer is definitely that of a sculptor with extreme obsessive-compulsive disorder who calls murders works of art. Really? This is just like what the murderer wrote in the post. This is under normal circumstances. We can't possibly think that the murderer would be a sculptor, not only because of the niche profession, but also because it is difficult to associate him with college students. But now that it is confirmed that the murderer is a sculptor, the difficulty of finding him will be relatively small. 20 years. This unsolved case that has lasted for 20 years finally feels like it will be solved. Compared to the excited Su Changxing, Lin Tian is still quite calm, or he dares not think that the murder case that has been hanging in his heart for 20 years is about to find the real murderer. But the next second, Lin Tian suddenly thought of something, then picked up the remote control on the desktop and opened the dark web video that NaN had previously recorded, skipped the previous part and checked the drug agent part. Then, Lin Tian slowly stood up and went to the blackboard in the conference room, and wrote down all the organization member codes that appeared in it: Doctor, Poison, Witch, Babu, Pastor, Rose, Ghost. Looking at all 11 organization member codes that appeared in the forum, Lin Tian frowned subconsciously, because none of the codes had anything to do with the sculptor, according to the previous special judgment. The code names of the members of this huge drug trafficking organization should all be derived from the usual killing methods or professions. But there is no code that can be related to the sculptor. Does this mean? Thinking of this, Lin Tian suddenly looked at Su Ming opposite him, and said seriously and admiringly, "Su Ming. Maybe you are right. The reason why the murderer of the 5.13 dismemberment case was absorbed into this drug trafficking organization and did not need to be responsible for the development or maintenance of the drug sales network. It is very likely that he is a veteran of this drug trafficking organization. The reason why he was connected with this organization is probably because he bought high-purity drugs. Many artists of this type choose to take drugs to get so-called inspiration. In addition, there is no shortage of money. They will definitely not be willing to take the low-quality drugs that are mixed with a lot of impurities and can shorten their lifespan by half a year. They will definitely choose to look for high-purity drugs. And through the high-purity drugs, they will naturally be connected with the leader of this drug trafficking organization. Then, I can now roughly determine one thing. Lin Tian paused for 2 seconds, sorted out his thoughts and continued. The murderer of the May 13th dismemberment case is most likely hiding in our Magic City, and he forced Chu Pengfei to death yesterday. Because, according to previous inferences, the member of the organization codenamed Poison in Gusu City should have returned to Gusu urgently after putting down the Shiba Inu filled with poison, and did not stay in Magic City for too long. Then, the other members of this organization are most likely stationed in the city under their jurisdiction. I don't think it's worth sending 2 members to monitor the family of Shogo. That explains it. There are also members who are not on this list who have dealt with Chu Pengfei under our noses. Thinking of the provocative dismemberment video, it seems that it can be roughly determined that the murderer is still in, or has always lived in Magic City. So no matter what, the first thing to do now is definitely. At this moment, Lin Tian showed an unprecedented sharp look, slammed the blackboard with his right hand, and said with all his emotions suppressed. Identify the murderer, put him under surveillance, and control his whereabouts. We must not give him any chance to escape. Chapter 94. The murderer is completely identified, a madman who regards killing as a work of art. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the past 20 years, the murderer of the May 13th dismemberment case has never been arrested and brought to justice. This has become Lin Tian's obsession and heartache for many years, but now, this case that has always been on his mind has finally been responded to. It is absolutely the most important thing at the moment to determine the identity of the murderer as soon as possible and send plainclothes detectives to keep an eye on him, without any hesitation. Su Ming immediately opened the laptop in front of him and began to search big data, since, in the current speculation, the murderer is a sculptor with a good reputation and social status. There must be relevant content or encyclopedia introduction on the internet. First, Su Ming began to look for well-known sculptors between the ages of 45-55, enter the filter conditions and press the enter key. In less than 3 seconds, the search page of big data was refreshed, and a total of 18 sculptors who met the conditions appeared. There is no doubt. This is the number of well-known sculptors who are considered to be between the ages of 45 to 55 by the Internet big data. The number of people displayed is so small, this is enough to reversely deduce why the murderer needs to deliberately conceal his left-handedness, but Su Ming did not hesitate at all. Add the important feature of left-handedness to the search option of big data and click the enter key. All of a sudden, there were only 5 sculptors left out of the original 18. Then, Su Ming added another piece of information, that he had lived in the Magic City for a long time and had his own studio, because, in order to deal with the bodies of the victims and store high-purity heroin, the murderer, who is a sculptor, must have his own studio, otherwise I am afraid he would have been discovered by the police long ago. Enter the last key element and press the enter key again to confirm the selection. The next second, there were originally 5 candidates, but only 1 was left. Su Ming immediately narrowed his eyes and clicked to view the specific information file of the suspect. Name, Zhou Shirwei. Age, 49. Gender, male. Representative works. Girl wrapped in bandages, confused temptation and inability to extricate oneself, traveler swinging a hoe, etc. Personal career. At the age of 17, he was admitted to the National Academy of Fine Arts with full marks. In his sophomore year, he switched to sculpture due to personal interest. In just 2 years, he carved many classic plaster statues. In his senior year, he held a personal graduation exhibition. In the spring of 2004, he won the Luban Award, the highest honor for national sculpture, with his work Girl Wrapped in Bandages, and completely became, in this pile of career profiles. Su Ming immediately noticed the rather conspicuous and eye-catching name of the work, Girl Wrapped in Bandages, he raised his eyebrows with some guesses in his mind and directly clicked on the blue hyperlink of the work name. As the network loaded, a female plaster sculpture without a head appeared, and the most horrifying thing was, the so-called bandages were actually just marks made on the body of the plaster statue with a carving knife. The size and shape of these marks are almost identical, which is indescribably terrifying and strangely beautiful. Of course, this is what ordinary people think when they see this sculpture. Su Ming immediately thought of something and waved his hand. Director Lin, Brother Sheng, come and take a look. Just talking about the lines on this plaster sculpture, do you think it looks like anything? As soon as the voice fell, Lin Tian and Su Changxing came to Su Ming's side immediately. While Su Changxing was still thinking, Lin Tian suppressed his anger and said with certainty, "This it is basically the same as the position where the victim of the 5.13 dismemberment case was cut and dismembered. I will never forget that when we police officers picked up the victim's dismembered body parts, we carried out extremely rigorous body part splicing in order to find clues. It took us 3 full days to roughly splice all the body parts, at least giving the victim's family a barely complete body." Hearing this, Su Changxing reacted immediately, took out the 5.13 dismemberment case file he was just reading, and turned directly to the part with the victim's body picture. There were not only the body parts that had just been picked up, but also the body pictures of hundreds of body parts spliced together. Looking at the spliced body pictures, he matched the plaster sculpture in the laptop. The next second, Lin Tian finally couldn't bear the anger, clenched his fist and hit the table hard, full of coldness. Not only did he use extremely cruel means to cook the victim and then cut the body into hundreds of pieces, and use a camera to record the dismemberment scene. The victim's body was divided into parts and made into his own so-called sculpture. In the 20 years since I became a police officer, I have never seen such a vicious and perverted criminal who can do such cruel things to his own kind. From Lin Tian's current mood, his anger can be clearly felt. At present, it has been basically confirmed that this sculptor named Zhou Shirwei. He was the murderer of the 5.13 dismemberment case at Shanghai University and a member of the huge drug trafficking organization, but for the sake of rigor, Su Ming still took out his cell phone from his pocket, called Wang Hu, and turned on the speaker. After waiting for a few seconds, the call was picked up. Without waiting for Wang Hu to ask anything, Su Ming asked without hesitation, "Who's he?" "First, check for me if there was a middle-aged man named Zhou Shirwei, 49 years old, who bought a ticket to enter Fantawild Happy World yesterday. And check the corresponding surveillance. See if he played the Ferris wheel in Fantawild Happy World that can see most of the Magic City." The voice fell. On the other end of the phone, there was a sound of continuous keyboard tapping, as if checking the records. Su Ming, who was waiting, seemed to be afraid that Su Changxing and Lin Tian did not understand the meaning of this action, so he explained. "From this case 20 years ago, I can roughly judge. This murderer named Zhou Shirwei definitely enjoys killing people as a work. I think that this time he solved Chu Pengfei, it is likely that he also regarded it as a display of his work. So when he solved Chu Pengfei yesterday, he deliberately waited until we came before taking action, and even left a recording video from 20 years ago to provoke. And 20 years ago, because this approach made him a well-known sculptor, I think he would probably secretly watch this special work somewhere. Think about it carefully. Around the Magic City Holiday Hotel, except for the Ferris wheel in Fantawild Happy World, there is no other place to clearly see this performance. And daring to be so arrogant means that Zhou Shirwei thinks we can't find him at all, so it is highly unlikely that he will use a fake identity." "He hasn't finished yet," Wang Hu's hurried and surprised voice suddenly came from the phone. "Brother Ming. Yesterday at 3 p.m., that Zhou Shirwei did buy a ticket to enter Fantawild Happy World." Chapter 95 The souvenirs left by the sculptor, the victim's internal organs that have never been dis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The voice from the phone. Lin Tian clenched his fists tightly, and his emotions were even more complicated. Zhou Shirwei appeared in Fantawild Happy World yesterday, which undoubtedly further confirmed his identity as the murderer. Taiwan Novel Network. Although there is no clear evidence yet, from the perspective of criminal investigation, his identity as the murderer can be basically confirmed. 20 years. This is in the full 20 years, the murderer of the 5.13 dismemberment case that he has been constantly looking for and tracking has finally surfaced completely. At this moment, there is relief in his heart that the truth has been found, but at the same time there is also some deep regret and pain. If he could think a little more at the beginning, like Su Ming, who was so thoughtful and tried to dig out the rare profession of sculptor, how could Zhou Shirwei live happily for 20 more years? Not to mention, Zhou Shirwei, who should have eaten peanuts long ago, actually used the victim's miserable state after being dismembered to carve the so-called perfect work and won the Luban Award. This is the real irony. The deceased was cruelly dismembered into hundreds of pieces, and the murderer could not be found for many years. It has become a topic of conversation among many people, and the murderer is still at large, completely unaffected, and even took the inspiration brought by this murder to become a top master in the industry, enjoying a high social status and wealth. Take a deep breath. Lin Tian suppressed all the complicated thoughts in his heart. Now the closer he is to the truth, the more he must stay calm. Wait for a few dozen seconds. Wang Hu's excited voice has come out from the phone again. Brother Ming. Zhou Shirwei didn't just enter Fantawild happy world. I just did what you said. I quickly looked at the Ferris wheel queue video, and found Zhou Shirwei queuing up to play half an hour before Chu Pengfei fell from the building. And from the surveillance perspective, Zhou Shirwei was wearing headphones all the time, and he said a few words from time to time, as if he was communicating with someone. The most important thing is. After seeing this important feature, Brother Quan immediately helped to review the entrance surveillance. It was found that Zhou Shirwei had been wearing headphones after entering the park, which is the same as the process our police team inferred yesterday. Chu Pengfei was remotely controlled, so he stood outside the balcony even though he didn't want to die. After listening to Wang Hu's story in detail, Su Ming glanced at Lin Tian and Su Chongqing beside him, and saw that neither of them had any intention of giving orders, and then said without hesitation. Hu Zi. Through Sky Eye surveillance, we can further determine Zhou Shirwei's current location. We must grasp his movements as soon as possible to avoid any accidents. Given the caution of this criminal organization, if they find that Zhou Shirwei has been exposed, they will do everything they can to find other members of the organization to get rid of him before we catch him. We must hurry up. That when Su Ming hung up the phone, Su Chongqing suddenly thought of something and frowned slightly. Master, Xiao Ming. Although the criminal murderer has been basically identified, we still lack key evidence. It feels that it will be difficult to convict Zhou Shirwei even if we catch him. And this kind of person must not be short of money, and the lawyers he hired are also difficult to deal with. Unless. The most important thing is to be able to directly find the key evidence of his murder and make him completely unable to turn the tables. Lin Tian thought very seriously for a few seconds, narrowed his eyes and said coldly and firmly. No need. It doesn't matter even if there is no evidence of the murder 20 years ago. Because. According to our previous inference, the reason why Zhou Shirwei was able to get in touch with the drug trafficking organization was most likely to find high-purity drugs. This is enough to prove. Zhou Shirwei definitely takes drugs on a regular basis, and he must have stockpiled a large amount of high-purity drugs, after all, with his status and financial resources. There is no need to buy a few grams at a time. So as long as you determine Zhou Shirwei's location later, don't waste time observing and tracking him, just arrest him and the team on the pretext of taking drugs. Take his blood and test his hair at that time. As long as there are traces of drug use, don't even think about leaving our team. Then. Just do everything you can to pry open his mouth, get the specific information of other members of the huge drug trafficking organization, and arrest them. Then let others identify Zhou Shirwei, and don't delay it. It's obvious. After being reminded by Su Ming's previous words, Lin Tian suddenly thought of Chu Pengfei who fell to his death, and realized how difficult it was to dig out Zhou Shirwei now. If the drug trafficking organization solved the problem in advance and cut off this clue again, it would be absolutely unacceptable, so using the excuse of drug use to directly arrest and control Zhou Shirwei in advance, and more importantly, to protect him, is what Lin Tian is thinking at the moment. Because, not only was the 5.13 Morta University corpse dismemberment case 20 years ago, but Zhou Shiwei was also the entry point for the huge drug trafficking organization hidden underground in the Dragon Kingdom. Su Ming was sitting next to him. Without wasting any time, he searched the internet to find various information and details about Zhou Shiwei. After a few seconds, he narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Forest Bureau. I think the clues shouldn't be hard to find. Because I just thought about it. In that experience post, the so-called letting the prey take the initiative to help conceal it, I think it probably means that the victim went to his workplace alone. And I don't want anyone to know about it. I won't tell anyone about it. I will even hide my whereabouts. To do this, we need to combine it with the profession of a sculptor. So I suspect it's probably." At the beginning, Zhou Shiwei used the reward of a mannequin to attract the victim to go alone, and he was unwilling to tell his roommates or family where he was going. It was mentioned in the previous file that the victim came from a small place. His family's financial situation was not very good, and he usually had the habit of working part-time on weekends. If by chance the victim saw the part-time job of recruiting mannequins and was tempted by the promise of huge rewards, it is very likely that he would conceal the matter and go to the location agreed by the murderer alone. Then I just checked Shi Rui's work location next week and found that his sculpture studio is in Jingjiang Villa, a very remote suburb. Furthermore, people are not allowed to enter his sculpture studio without making an appointment in advance, and they don't even have a ventilation window for themselves. They say they don't want to be disturbed when they are creating, and they don't want the noise of tapping plaster to affect the surrounding neighbors. The most important thing is the fact that he has not changed his workplace for more than 20 years undoubtedly proves that this is where Zhou Shiwei dismembered the victim. For a murderer like Zhou Shiwei who is paranoid about pursuing perfection, he will definitely leave relevant case items in the studio to commemorate this perfect item. Of course, when I say commemoration, I don't mean the video of the dismemberment, but there are other commemorative items. Speaking of which, Su Ming suddenly paused for 2 seconds, his eyes suddenly became sharp and cold, and he said slowly, "Forest Bureau. Did you notice something? 20 years ago, our criminal investigation brigade discovered all the body parts of the victim, and we were able to roughly piece them together into a single person. But I can't find it. Any piece of the victim's internal organs." Chapter 97. What is a perfect work? The victim's internal organs are inside the statue. You are listening at novelfull.audio. For police cars with sirens blaring were speeding on the highway, they were heading towards the suburban villa where Zhou Shiwei's studio was located. Because time was running out, Su Chongqing once again showed the strongest racing skills of the Huaihai Criminal Investigation Brigade. He never let go of the accelerator and even used drifting when turning. He was the first to take the lead. He was afraid that if he was half a minute late, Zhou Shiwei would be solved in advance by other members of the drug trafficking organization, causing the case to fall into trouble again. I hope readers will remember our domain name Taiwan Novel Network. In the case meeting room at this time, there were only 2 people left. Lin Tian narrowed his eyes and thought for a few seconds, then looked at Su Ming in front of him and said slowly, "Xiao Ming. While waiting for the results of both sides, let's sort out the many details of this May 13th dismemberment case and see if there is anything missing." Speaking of this, Lin Tian habitually took out a cigarette from his pocket. When he was about to take it out and light it to help him think, he suddenly remembered that this was not his office. He was about to relieve his addiction by smelling his yellowed fingers. "It's okay, Director Lin, I don't mind the smell of cigarettes." Su Ming smiled and gestured. "Besides, I also think if there is a cigarette in his hand, Director Lin should be able to sort out the case more clearly." Hearing this, Lin Tian was not polite, and couldn't wait to take out a cigarette and light it, and clamped it between the index and middle fingers of his left hand. Except for a light puff when lighting it, Lin Tian did not touch the cigarette again, but just let it burn slowly between his fingers and emit smoke. Carefully recalling the many details of the case 20 years ago, and combining it with today's clues, Lin Tian narrowed his eyes slightly, and then slowly started to sort out the case. First of all, This May 13 dismemberment case happened 20 years ago. The victim was a freshman girl named Wu Jingqing who came to Shanghai University from a small place to continue her studies. According to the files 20 years ago and many clues now, we can know. The victim's family conditions were not good, so she had been doing various part-time jobs since she entered school, which provided conditions for the murderer Zhou Shirwei. Zhou Shirwei, who was already quite famous in his 20s at the time, suffered from the fact that he could not make his own technology and inspiration go a step further. So in this extreme struggle, he decided to use the most bloody and perverted methods to allow himself to gain some inspiration. In his eyes, murder is also a work of art, especially the way he handles the corpse. In this way, in order to achieve the murder for the purpose, Zhou Shirwei posted a high-priced part-time job for nude models through unknown means. It happened that the victim saw it and was immediately attracted by the high remuneration, and took the initiative to contact Zhou Shirwei, but because at that time, nude models were not a glorious thing, and were more likely to become a laughing stock and topic of conversation for others. Therefore, this part-time victim would never mention it to relatives, friends, and classmates, but would only go to Zhou Shirwei's studio quietly, and even cover up or wear a mask and hat to go, just to prevent people from knowing that he had taken this part-time job. This point. Naturally, it is completely in line with the details of how to find prey in the posts shared on the forum. Don't go looking for prey yourself, but let the prey come to you, and they will also take the initiative to help hide all possible traces of exposure. Speaking of this, Lin Tian paused slightly, shook the cigarette ash with his hand, and then continued to narrate. When the victim came to the remote villa office with the idea of working part-time to supplement the family income, Zhou Shirwei killed him extremely cruelly. And it was not just a simple murder. Zhou Shirwei used the knowledge of human skeletons required for sculpture to perform extremely cruel dissection and dismemberment of the victim, and recorded everything with a camera. Because Zhou Shirwei's studio is quite remote and the sound insulation is very good, the dismemberment could not attract the attention of neighbors at all. The victim's body was cooked and cut into pieces. Even because of Zhou Shirwei's obsessive-compulsive disorder, the size and shape of the body pieces were almost the same. Finally, these body parts, which were cut into hundreds of pieces, were put into 5 bags and thrown into various places in the Magic City. The range of the body dumping is very large and the distance between them is also very far. It is difficult to do it with just your legs. Bicycles or the motorcycle was too conspicuous, indicating that the murderer used a car to dispose of the body. 20 years ago, the murderer was able to record the dismemberment process with a camera and drive the car to dispose of the body, which once again confirmed that the murderer was in good financial condition at the time, excluding the most common possibility of killing for money. After killing and dismembering the victim, Zhou Shirwei also used the cutting lines of the victim's body to create a special sculpture that won the Luban Award, Girl Wrapped in Bandages. After comparison, the segmentation lines of the victim's body were almost the same as the engraved lines representing the bandages of this sculpture, further confirming the case. At the same time, in the recorded video, Zhou Shirwei called it a perfect work after dismembering the body. But according to the segmentation of the victim's body and the only recorded video, the victim's internal organs have not appeared. In current speculation, the reason may be that Zhou Shirwei left a special souvenir for this perfect work. This moment, Su Ming sat opposite and listened carefully. After hearing Lin Tian connect perfect works with internal organs and mention the sculpture that won the Luban Award, he had once been a crazy criminal, and suddenly he thought of some extremely crazy and perverted method. Key content such as perfect works, internal organs, bandaged girls, Luban Prize sculptures, etc. kept popping up in his mind. There was no hesitation, immediately pick up the case file on the desktop and look at the spliced picture of the victim's body. Su Ming could clearly see that there was an extremely obvious trace of abdominal dissection on the lower back of the spliced victim's body. There is a big difference in the appearance of the wound between removing the organs after death and cutting them after cooking, immediately afterwards. Su Ming picked up the laptop screen in front of him again and directly searched for high-definition pictures of Zhou Shirwei's work girl covered with bandages. Maximize the high-definition picture and carefully observe the waist position of the statue. Discover. it was almost exactly the same location as when the victim's abdomen was opened to remove the organs, and there were extremely obvious signs of repair. The carving depth of this line is even greater than the cutting marks at other locations. Then, Su Ming immediately checked the specific weight of the statue, and after mass conversion, he found, this plaster sculpture called Girl, covered with bandages, weighs several kilograms lighter than normal. That is to say, there is a high probability that a certain part of the statue was hollowed out and replaced with something lighter. Think of this. Su Ming looked at Lin Tian, who had just finished recreating the case, and said seriously and solemnly, "Forest Bureau. I may have a rough idea of where the victim's internal organs are hidden by Zhou Shirwei." Su Ming temporarily stopped talking, turned the laptop screen to Lin Tian, pointed at the abdomen of the statue and continued. "If I guess correctly, the victim's internal organs. It's all in the belly of this statue." Chapter 98 Human Skin Mask. Su Ming discovers a peeping sewer rat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The victim's internal organs were inside the statue's belly. This sentence, Lin Tian was stunned for a moment, and even more stunned, the victim's organs were stuffed into the belly of the statue as a souvenir. In the end, this work won the Luban Award, the top award in the sculpture industry of Longguo. How crazy and perverted do you have to be to do this? Taiwan Novel networked it, and just thinking about it for a moment will really make people feel some indescribable scalp numbness. Stub out the cigarette between your fingers. Lin Tian was about to ask where Su Ming derived this conclusion. Su Ming's cell phone placed on the table suddenly rang a rapid ringtone. After clicking on the speaker to pick up, Wang Hu's rather anxious and urgent words came out. "Brother Ming, something's wrong. Our criminal investigation technology section just looked carefully at the exit of Fantawild Adventure several times. Discover. Zhou Shirwei has not left the exit at all from yesterday to now. He is probably still in Fantawild Paradise. Could it be that the drug trafficking organization has already dealt with it, so that's why we haven't?" Hear this, Lin Tian's expression immediately became serious, but he still maintained his due calmness. Su Ming immediately thought for a few seconds, then shook his head and answered. "It shouldn't be. In the few hours after Zhou Shirwei forced Chu Pengfei to jump off the building, we actually didn't make much progress on the case, let alone Zhou Shirwei. Several hours have passed since the dark net was breached. Zhou Shirwei has enough time to leave Fangta Happy World. That huge drug trafficking organization will not send anyone else to specifically deal with Zhou Shirwei. Because it seemed at the time that Zhou Shirwei had successfully completed the tasks assigned by the organization. And based on the cautious style of the leader of this drug trafficking organization, if it is found that Zhou Shirwei is at risk or possible of exposure, there is a high probability that they will find a way to let Zhou Shirwei safely leave Fantawild Paradise before solving the problem, instead of sending people to the paradise again to increase the risk of exposure. Plus, after Chu Pengfei fell from the building, normal criminal suspects should be afraid. We directly blocked Fantawild Entertainment World for screening. We must take advantage of the chaos to get out. So I think Zhou Shirwei has most likely left Fantawild Adventure, but when there is only one exit. Forget it, I'll go over and take a look." Speaking of which, Su Ming hung up the phone and looked at Lin Tian, who had a cold and dignified expression before he could say anything. He stood up and signaled. "Let's go, Xiao Ming. Let's go to the technical section together. We must hurry up and determine Zhou Shirwei's current location." "Right. After just listening to the chat between you and Huzi, I am now very doubtful whether Zhou Shirwei has used small means such as disguise and makeup to get out of Fantawild World, but the people in the technical department did not notice it. Even wearing a human skin mask. After all, you need to enter the Fantawild Happy World with your real name, and you don't need to check your ticket to go out. Judging from the capabilities currently displayed by this drug trafficking organization, a human skin mask is a certain possibility. And if I remember correctly, of all the cities selling high-purity drugs, the unsolved case in Liangxi City is related to human skin. It seems to be called the Rose Flower Shop Uncovered Case. The victim's face was completely removed and fixed on the glass door of the flower shop with tape. Hear these words, Su Ming nodded in agreement, and then answered seriously while packing up the files and laptop. Indeed. If it really disappears under our noses, we must seriously doubt the possibility of wearing makeup or a human skin mask. 2 minutes later, Su Ming and Lin Tian had already arrived at the Criminal Investigation Technology section. Lin Tian, who was already quite anxious, immediately asked without hesitation. Hu Zi, Quan. How is the situation now? Have you found any trace of Zhou Shirwei? That at this time, and Quan, who was using the most advanced face comparison technology to compare surveillance images, adjusted his glasses habitually and shook his head. Report to the Forest Bureau. Currently, we can see Zhou Shirwei walking into Fantawild Adventure alone and queuing up to board the Ferris wheel. As for the exit direction, I've just compared faces several times, but I can't find any similar people. Wang Hu, who was sitting next to him, also took over and continued to talk. To avoid the instability of face recognition, I and other people in the technical department also divided the surveillance video for a period of time and carefully analyzed it several times. Discover. There really is no one with a similar face to Zhou Shirwei. Even the characteristics of clothes, pants and other items are not found. This answer, Lin Tian frowned deeply, rubbed his chin and said slowly. Can't find it? Look carefully to see if there is anyone wearing a human skin mask or disguise. I don't believe it. How can a living person disappear for no reason? Human skin mask. This is a special and uncommon word. Wang Hu was stunned for a moment, and when he was about to ask something else, Su Ming patted his shoulder and said. Hu Zi, send me the Sky Eye monitoring system. I'll take a look too. What method did Zhou Shirwei use to avoid this Sky Eye monitoring? Seeing that the computers equipped with Sky Eye monitoring are now being used by people. In addition, just now, Lin Tian also issued an order for everyone to watch the monitoring again, so Su Ming naturally couldn't use other people's computers, so he could only ask Wang Hu to send him a copy of the Sky Eye monitoring system software. After hearing this, although Wang Hu immediately sent the Sky Eye monitoring system to Su Ming, he scratched his head and asked with some doubts. Brother Ming. The Sky Eye monitoring system requires internal authentication, and requires a specific internal account. You can't log in with your own laptop, right? For Wang Hu's doubts, Su Ming smiled faintly and pressed his hand to signal him to relax. After all, this is the Sky Eye monitoring system. In the past, in order to cover up and delete the facts of the crime, I don't know how many times I have secretly broken through it. I can only say, long illness makes a doctor, and practice makes perfect. Now the Sky Eye monitoring system in various cities in Longwa, Su Ming can even use hacking technology to break through with his eyes closed. He was not in a hurry to break through the Sky Eye monitoring system. Su Ming squinted his eyes and thought seriously for a few seconds, and determined that with Zhou Shirwei's crazy personality, he would definitely see Chu Pengfei fall from the building before leaving, and it takes about 10 minutes to walk from the Ferris wheel to the exit of Fantawild Happy World. At the same time, Zhou Shirwei is likely not to stay in Fantawild Happy World for too long. If we infer by time, it is likely that Zhou Shirwei left Fantawild Happy World between 10 and 30 minutes after Chu Pengfei fell from the building. After determining the important time period, without any hesitation, Su Ming immediately opened the Sky Eye monitoring system and skillfully entered a special command. Just when he was about to forcefully invade and obtain the highest authority. Unexpected discovery. There was an IP address from abroad that took the lead in obtaining the highest authority, and it is still logged in. Seeing this IP address, Su Ming was stunned for a moment, and then he immediately thought of a possibility and said to himself coldly. Interesting. Do the rats in the gutter dare to hide on the beams and peek? Chapter 99, Tracking the Mouse's Tail. K smashes the computer again. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Saw this sneaked overseas IP address. Su Ming immediately thought that the source of this IP was probably the leader of the criminal organization that established the dark network. After all, judging from his usual caution, it is indeed very possible that in order to observe the progress of the current case and determine whether other organization members have been discovered, they chose to invade the Sky Eye monitoring. Because I want to know the general movements of the police, except for the insider reporting the news. there is absolutely no other method that is as useful as sky eye monitoring. Moreover, it can also be seen from the several interception methods previously set up on the dark web. The hacking skills of this drug trafficking organization leader are definitely among the best in the world. It is not difficult to hack into sky eye surveillance, and it is definitely not just the sky eye surveillance in Huaihai district, the magical capital, that has been invaded. If nothing else happens, the sky eye surveillance in several other cities must have also been invaded. In other words, every move of the police during this period is likely to be under the attention of the leader of the drug trafficking organization. Think of this. Without any hesitation, Su Ming quickly looked up at Lin Tian beside him and said seriously. Forest Bureau. I just found a hidden overseas IP in the background of sky eye monitoring. There is a high probability that we are not the only ones using sky eye monitoring. Even the leader of this drug trafficking organization is also using sky eye surveillance to observe us. Hear this, Lin Tian was stunned for a moment, and felt indescribable shock and disbelief, because, in his 20 years as a police officer, he has never heard of such an arrogant criminal. How dare you hack into the sky eye system to monitor police actions? How arrogant and audacious is this? It was even more nerve-wracking than the death row inmate from Shu who yelled at the trial and asked the judge to stop screaming. As a criminal police officer, Lin Tian naturally knew very well how terrible it was that all the whereabouts of the police were controlled by criminals. After a brief moment of shock, Lin Tian immediately looked at Quan, who was also a little surprised, and shouted. Ah, Quan! Check quickly to see if the sky eye system has really been invaded, and take countermeasures immediately. Otherwise, what's the difference between us and those criminals openly fighting landlords? Hear this, and Quan immediately became serious, forgetting to adjust his glasses as he prepared to log into the backend to check the time. Su Ming's unquestionable words came immediately afterward. Brother Quan, please wait a moment. This overseas IP, I guess, probably uses several layers of broilers as a springboard and hiding place. But compared to that dark web server, it is more convenient to trace the source, so I will try first to see if I can dig out his real IP address. If it can be dug out, it will be possible to determine where he is currently. After saying that, Quan's eyes suddenly lit up, and he quickly came behind Su Ming and stared at the laptop screen. He adjusted his black-rimmed glasses to take a closer look at what method Su Ming was going to use to dig out this overseas IP that had jumped several levels. Now, Su Ming didn't pay attention to the gazes of others, and began to type on the keyboard quickly with both hands. I plan to use this key point of accessing the sky eye system to dig out the specific IP address. As the command indicators popped up one after another, the light in Quan's eyes became brighter and brighter. Because Su Ming's idea was so genius, he actually disguised a Trojan horse virus that could transmit IP information into an inconspicuous data packet. This is used to hide the various firewalls specially set up by the other party, and analyze the IP address layer by layer like peeling garlic. This was less than 3 minutes. Su Ming broke through the 7th level broiler springboard, and the IP address was also resolved from overseas to Longguohui province. 30 seconds later, another layer of IP addresses has been peeled off, and the address has been located in Luzhou City, Hui province, Long State. Immediately afterwards, 30 seconds later, the location was further refined, and it was naturally located in Sangshan district, Luzhou City. This moment, Quan became more and more excited, and subconsciously clenched his fists hard. If nothing else happens, after another 30 seconds, another 10% of the IP address was peeled off. Even if it was not the final real address, it would certainly be able to narrow the specific range to a few dozen meters, but at this moment. Dip dip dip, a transmission failure notification sounded in the laptop, indicating that the other party had unilaterally terminated receiving the file. This IP address mining was finally determined to be in the area. See the transfer failed prompt box on the screen, and Quan, who usually didn't show many expressions, sighed with regret, shook his head and sighed. What a shame. It's just the last step. Compared to Quan's regret, Su Ming didn't care at all, with a faint smile on his lips, indicating something. Brother Quan, it's not a pity. Actually, when I broke through the 3-layer broiler springboard, the other party had already noticed something strange. Only. He has been looking for the source of the Trojan virus in an attempt to prevent my breakthrough, and he may not be willing to give up the convenience of Sky Eye monitoring, so he has been fighting with me on the network level for so long. Later, when he found that he couldn't stop my breakthrough at all, he was worried that he couldn't even turn off the computer in time, so he had to choose the last resort. The last resort? Lin Tian asked back in confusion. He was obviously a little behind the times when it came to this kind of high-tech network, and Quan's eyes were full of admiration. He looked at the series of indicator codes on the laptop screen and answered. Director Lin. For such top hackers, they basically set their laptops as servers or hotspots. On the one hand, it is to facilitate work, and on the other hand, it is also to facilitate the final resort after being discovered. Smash the computer. At this moment, on the top floor of Xingxing Building in Sangshan District, Luzhou City, an expensive laptop was smashed directly to the ground, and various parts and fragments were scattered around, and even many fell into the swimming pool. K, who was wearing a shirt, was looking at the smashed laptop on the ground at this time. He was always calm, but his face was a little angry, and he said to himself with a rather ugly smile. Very good, Su Ming. This is the second time I lost to you. Over the years, you are the only one who can make me smash the computer twice. But I hope you will never let me go to extremes. Otherwise, K did not finish the rest of the words. Instead, he glanced, the priest who was also on the top floor, holding a cigar and wiping a heavy sniper rifle,